Hi, Conrad White here at Success Council. Before we get started, I wanted to mention how overwhelmed we've been here at Success Council by the tremendous response from our last video on the Audit the Fed. I think that video is waking people faster than any other video we've made. Today, we're going to have some fun. Later on, if you like, you can take a quiz and compare yourself politically to Gandhi, Obama, Romney, Stalin, Mao, Ron Paul, and many others. Although, I warn you, you might not like the results you get. Now, you probably think that after this test, we'll tell you where you are on the left-right political spectrum you fall. Well, we're not going to do that because I think the left-right political spectrum makes no sense whatsoever. In fact, the reason left versus right is perpetuated in the media and through the education system is that it hinders political discussion on real topics. I mean, think about it. We're told that on the far left you have totalitarian communism, and on the far right you have totalitarian fascism. In the middle, we have moderates. Moderates, meaning moderate forms of two different types of totalitarianism? There's no such thing. And tell me, where in this spectrum does liberty fit in? Where would an anarchist go? Where would the USA's founding fathers fit? I bet they would not be caught dead on that spectrum. So in order to have a meaningful debate, we need to define a new spectrum that actually means something. The only one that makes any sense to me is the one offered by G. Edward Griffin. On one side of the spectrum, you have 100% authoritarian. On the other, you have no state at all. Anarchy. The more you're in favor of the government using their coercive lawmaking powers, the more you move to authoritarian. The more you're in favor of letting individuals voluntarily solve their own problems, the more you move toward the anarchist side of the spectrum. Now we have a spectrum that actually means something. But there is one more addition we can add that will make this spectrum far more useful. This idea is offered by www.politicalcompass.org. They suggest that generally, political conversations fall into one of two categories, social and economic. To make the spectrum even more useful, they suggest creating a political compass, with the horizontal axis representing economic issues and the vertical axis representing social ones. The top of the compass represents when government has complete power over social issues. The left of the compass represents when the government has complete power over the economy. Likewise, the bottom and right of the compass represents when individuals have complete power and the state has none. I think the best way to explain this is to run through a few examples. Let's take the stereotypical view of the U.S. Republican Party. With regard to the economy, they're known as fiscal conservatives. Compared to the Democrats, at least, they say government is bad at managing the economy. Therefore, taxes should be low and bureaucracy small. That pushes them to the right half of the compass. What about social issues? Well, paradoxically, they think government is brilliant at telling people who they can marry, what they can smoke, what drugs they can ingest, and so on. They even think they have the right to use their military to tell other countries what form of government they should have. All of these things tell us that Republicans are far more authoritarian on their social issues than their economic ones. So that puts them in the top half of the spectrum. Therefore, we see Republicans are in the right-hand upper corner of the political compass. What about Democrats? Well, they say government has no business telling people who to marry, what drugs they take, or what sexual orientation they should be. They think the government is terrible at making decisions for us on how to live and therefore should not. And the government especially has no right to tell other people around the world how they should live. So naturally, Democrats will be more anti-war than the Republicans. This puts Democrats on the bottom half of the compass. They enjoy their social liberty. What about economically? Well, this is a different story entirely. They might say people are greedy, selfish, and don't know how to share. And most people don't know how to take care of themselves economically. What if people get sick and die? Government needs to take control of the economy and these people through high taxes collected from the selfish and greedy people. Well, this puts them on the left-hand side of the compass. So Democrats are traditionally known to be in the bottom left-hand side. What about the ever-increasingly popular Libertarian movement? Well, finally, we have a little bit of congruency at least. They say government is terrible at both. On the social spectrum, when it comes to spreading their ideologies around the globe, they believe in the power of good example and persuasion, not military force. This applies equally to what you can eat, what drugs you choose to take, who you can marry, and what your sexual orientation is. Libertarians say no government has the right to interfere in your life, and government power usually yields an undesirable outcome. They are in the bottom half of the compass. And how about economically? They believe in free market principles. Libertarians say the government has no right to steal your property no matter how noble the cause may be. Their reason is because once that right is granted, it will get corrupted and used by the wealthy to steal from the poor and middle classes. Libertarians are on the right half of the compass, so they are in the bottom right quadrant. In both cases, they think the individual has the right of freedom of choice. They think people should be treated like adults and make their own decisions. So who lives up here in the top left-hand quadrant? Well, in the extreme, these are the megalomaniac, power-hungry tyrants of the world. Totalitarianism. They believe the government is the solution to all problems we face. Exactly opposite to libertarians. They think the group is more important than the individual. At the social extreme, they may act like Hitler and choose to exterminate homosexuals, invalids, and Jews for the betterment of the group. They may favor a particular hair and eye color. Like Chinese authorities, they may limit your ability to have children for the sake of the group. Economically, like Stalin, they may take ownership and control of every resource in the country. They control the value and price of money. They tell people where to work, for what hours, and for what pay, if any at all. To make things more efficient for them to rule, they believe in a one-world government. Of course, they generally only like this form of government when they are in power at the top. Although they claim to do this so that everyone gets their fair share, some people's share is inevitably fairer than others. So, okay, I think you have a pretty good idea of how the political compass works. Armed with this tool, let me share my thoughts on how the political system works in America and indeed most of the world. I believe that the ruling class or politicians in this world are generally tyrants from the totalitarian quadrant. They lie and say the things someone in the Republican or Democrat quadrant would say, but they only do half of what they say, the half that is congruent with tyranny. The half that is congruent with liberty is ignored once they take office. For example,
I will promise you this, that if we have not gotten our troops out by the time I am president, it is the first thing I will do. I will get our troops home. We will bring an end to this war. You can take that to the bank.
That is certainly something we would expect a Democrat to believe in. But he made no attempt whatsoever to do it. In fact, he expanded the military presence of the U.S. overseas. But the welfare programs like Obamacare he promised, which were congruent with totalitarianism, he delivered. What about Bush? Any difference?
But I think one way for us to end up being viewed as the ugly American is for us to go around the world saying, we do it this way, so should you. If we don't stop extending our troops all around the world in nation-building missions, then we're going to have a serious problem coming down the road, and I'm going to prevent that.
I'm concerned that we're over-deployed around the world.
I don't want to be the world's policeman. I want to be the world's peacemaker.
Your question was deployment. The force must be strong enough so that the mission can be accomplished, and the exit strategy needs to be well-defined.
So there, he wins over the crowd with talk of humble foreign policy and peace. That's not exactly what comes to mind when I think about his presidency. He knew full well there were no weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. But he went in nation building anyway. And 10 years later, there's still no exit strategy defined. Why? Because he's just a tyrant in sheep's clothing. What about the two of them working together as a team to advance tyranny?
Let me just explain for those who are unfamiliar with this issue. We've got a government designed by the founders so that there'd be checks and balances. You don't want a president who's too powerful, or a Congress who's too powerful, or a courts who's too powerful. Everybody's got their own role. Congress's job is to pass legislation. The president can veto it, or he can sign it. But what George Bush has been trying to do as part of his effort to accumulate more power in the presidency is he's been saying, well, I can basically change what Congress passed by attaching a letter saying, I don't agree with this part or I don't agree with that part. I'm going to choose to interpret it this way or that way. That's not part of his power. But this is part of the whole theory of George Bush, that he can make laws as he's going along. I disagree with that. I taught the Constitution for 10 years. I believe in the Constitution, and I will obey the Constitution of the United States. We're not going to use signing statements as a way of doing an end run around Congress. All right?
That was his election promise. Less than 2 months after his inauguration, Obama is using signing statements. He confessed to the crime just months before committing the crime. Why? Because Obama, Bush, Romney, and Clinton are all teammates. Their jerseys all say totalitarianism. But you might ask, if they are the same team, why are some jerseys blue and some jerseys red? There are two primary reasons for that. One, they need to give you the illusion of choice. If you realize that you were controlled by a tyrannical force and not really free at all, you might protest, strike, and otherwise be a difficult subject for your master. And two, creating the illusion of choice keeps you voting. And voting for one of the two tyrants gives sanction to their behavior. How can you get angry at the politician when the things he promised you backfire? Either you voted for him or your fellow citizen did. We seem to forget the fact that he only did the things that marched the country to totalitarianism and ignored his promises to move the country to freedom. Eventually, after 4 or 8 years of them, enough of us want to change. We start to dislike them and their red or blue jerseys' ways. So we vote for the other color looking forward to real change. As long as we vote for red or blue, though, there will be no change. Either way, the totalitarian team always wins. So am I telling you something you don't know? Well, a Rasmussen poll recently asked the question, when looking at a choice between Obama and Romney, is it a choice you're excited about, or will you simply be voting for the lesser of two evils? The results, 45% are excited, and 46% consider it the lesser of two evils. This means more people have figured it out than not. So why do the red and blue jerseys get over 80% of the vote? Or a better question, why does the totalitarian party get over 80% of the vote? Most people's response to this question is, well, what are you going to do? Not vote at all? Of course, not voting is better than sanctioning evil. If you were in a room with two innocent children and I had a gun with one bullet and asked which one should I shoot, would you pick one or choose none? Choosing none is better than sanctioning evil. Now, while voting for either Romney or Obama is worse than not voting at all, that is not what I'm suggesting. The ultimate solution must be to vote for someone who has advanced the cause of liberty and not totalitarianism. But I warn you, look at their deeds and not what they say. That's why I suggest Americans write in Ron Paul's name when they vote. And for the Brits out there, I suggest Nigel Farage. Now, I know a lot of you just had a media-induced Pavlovian response kick in. A voice in your head saying, but voting for them is a wasted vote. Remind yourself that wasting your vote is better than sanctioning evil, and voting for a libertarian is better than doing nothing. So get some guts and be a leader instead of a follower. If you display courage, others will follow. Even if a libertarian doesn't win the election, more freedom fighters will be encouraged to vote that way too in the next election. Okay, we've kind of run out of time here. I promised you we would do a test so you can compare yourself to Romney, Obama, Gandhi, etc. I'm going to have to do that in the next video. After you like and share this video, head over to successcouncil.com for more great videos. See you soon.